Hey guys, hope you are having a good day. I just wanted to take some time and share some additional information with you in regards to the times that we're living in. I bring this up and I continue to bring it up, uh, and I'm talking about the strife that exists in America, amongst, people of color. And I say it that way because I realize that if you're not a person of color, um, it's easy for you to formulate the conclusion that, America does not have a problem. That, for the most part, um, racism, does not exist. And I suspect, I'm saying, if I was on the other side, if my skin was pale or white, um, I suspect that I might have that same opinion, especially if I chose, to either ignore it or not give it any credibility. Uh, because at the end of the day, it's not affecting me and it does not affect, my environment, my community, at least not directly. And so all the talk and all of the, someone was telling me the other day, that and I know they were telling me that racism and these type of things, black and white issues, are just political, and obviously that was taken, I took it as offense because there's too much evidence, around us all for anyone to think that racism is just a political ploy by the government to keep the people divided, not when there are actual acts of violence, what I'm saying, and discrimination against, people of color. I mean, it's just, it was unfair for them to say that, although they had a right to say it, still was unfair and absolutely incorrect. Now that leads me to the core reason for doing this video today. A lot of times and I'm going to talk, that leads me to the core reason for doing this video today. But I also want to bring up, a role model, someone that's highly respected by both, whites and people of color. Someone that there's a national holiday dedicated to this individual based off of this individual's service to this country. And this individual I'm talking about is Martin Luther King Jr. Interestingly enough, whenever people talk about Martin Luther King Jr., we talk about "I Have a Dream," or they talk about the "I Have a Dream" speech. They teach it in the classroom to the children, in grammar school. You hear about it, in any type of protest. You hear it in any type of liberal gatherings where people are coming together and saying, we need to live out the dream. We need to live the dream that Martin Luther King spoke of. Well, just recently, I decided to go back and re-listen to the Martin Luther King's "I Have a Dream" speech because I didn't recall. I recalled the end of the speech, but I also understood that was at the end of the speech. He talked about America that he envisioned, America that had the potential, if it desired to, could be a place of utopia in terms of people together. But he also talked about it in terms of a dream. And prior to him talking about the dream, the end part of his speech, here's some of the things that he spoke about in the body of his speech. Okay, first he talked about 100 years later, and at that time it was 1963, that so-called black people were still not free in America. Now this is Martin Luther King saying this, okay, doing that speech. 100 years later, blacks still were not free. Was he talking about slavery? Obviously, he wasn't talking about slavery because, as we all know, 1963, people of color were no longer enslaved, but people of color were still being discriminated against in jobs, housing, finances, you know, governmental, protection, etc. Then he said 100 years later, discrimination, as I just mentioned, I guess, still existed. He also said 100 years later, blacks were still at the bottom of the economic ladder. He also said, he also said 100 years later that blacks, now get this, I want you to listen to this real carefully, so-called black people were still exiled in their own land. Did you hear what I said? When he said 100 years later, blacks were still exiled in their own land. He didn't say anything about Africa or any other place. He talked about right here in this country, blacks were exiled in their own land. Martin Luther King said this. So when you hear me talk about that, then, don't look at that strange, or don't take some type of, get into your feelings about it, or look at it with some type of emotion, because a lot of you guys who will feel that way are the same people who go around talking about how great Martin Luther King was, and how that, we all just need to, why don't we all just get along and put racism behind us and pretend like it does not exist. It does exist. But again, I share this information with you so that, you understand the basis, as people of color, why we continue to bring it up, just as he brought it up. Okay? And he said we were exiled in our own land, meaning that we've always been here. Now, Europeans haven't always been here. But people of color, Native American, copper color people, you hear me talking about it all the time. We have always been here. And even your hero, the holiday that you celebrate says the exact same thing. Let's go a little bit farther. He says that America has defaulted on its promise. Now, what promise is that? He was talking about the 13th and the 14th Amendment. Equal justice for all, people of color being freed, except for the prison industry complex, so we know how that went. We talked about that before. But when he says that America has defaulted, he was saying that so-called people of color, black slaves, were told that they were free, and they were not free. It just went from slavery to black codes to Jim Crow, etc. He also talked about the 14th Amendment, is that, again, all the rights to a citizen of a person born here would be given all the rights, equal rights, justice. No way something would happen to one group and not be happening to another group. He said America has defaulted on it. 100 years later, he also said that America had written a bad check. A check that says insufficient funds to people of color. In other words, America, again, had reneged on its promise to give people of color every opportunity that should be afforded to them as American citizens. And that you have no right, whoever you might be, that in any form or fashion that would be discriminating against someone because of the color of their skin were in default, you had reneged, you were untrustworthy, that you should be taken to court, and you should be held accountable to the highest degree of the court for defaulting on your promise. Obviously to the government, but the people of the government. At least that's what we say, we the people of the United States of America, to form a more perfect union. So you're the government. You're not going to blame this on, Donald Trump and that group. Yeah, they're the law writers. I agree. But at the end of the day, we're the people. You're the people. And since you're the majority of the people, guess what? You get to say what's going to be tolerated and what's not going to be tolerated from a legal perspective. Then he went on to say blacks want justice and they want freedom. And then he said he wanted to remind, America that it was now that blacks wanted, so-called blacks wanted justice and freedom. Not tomorrow, not some other time, that they wanted it now. Now was the time. And he went on further in saying that now was the time to end racism. I just mentioned that. He also said if America did not fulfill its promise, that there would be trouble. Yeah, peaceful Martin Luther King Jr. said that there would be trouble because blacks were not going to wait any longer. They were not going to rest any longer. They were not going to be peaceful any longer. And they were going to do whatever they needed to do to get justice, to get what was owed to them, that check, that insufficient check that was written. I think he was talking about, I think he was talking about restitution. I think he was saying that because of the promises that were made by your forefathers, even back to the whole 40 acres and a mule, that was never given. Yet today, people tell other people of color, they need to pull themselves up. Everybody else has done it, or everybody else got help in doing it. But the people who built this country that everybody wants to come to, I'm talking about with their blood, with their toil, with their sweat, raising other people's children, nursing other people's children, picking food, planting food for other people's children. Those people who were not allowed to participate, they were not able to reap the benefits of their work. To this day, as Martin Luther King was saying, have not been compensated. And when you hear blacks talking about restitution today, everybody, start to cry wolf. Well, we don't owe you nothing. Well, why are you here? Why do you see this land as the most valuable land on the earth? Why do you refuse to leave? For the same reasons that we were here, always have been here. Because we were the foundation. We built it when you came, and you heard me talk about this before. When you came on those ships as they were running your ancestors out of Europe. Go back, check your tree. They were running them out of Europe. And you came here destitute, sick, diseased, starving to death. And with people, copper-colored Native American people, were the ones who extended your hand, extended your forefathers a hand to help them survive. Go back and check your own history. It's there. It's written clearly. I have. The reason that you're here today, especially if you're 3, 4, 5 generations, American. And if you're 2-generation American, a friend of mine said, well, my parents didn't come here till the early 1900s or whatever. Well, they still came. And why did they come? Why didn't they stay in Ireland or Scotland or England, France, Poland, Brazil, Mexico, Ecuador, Peru, San Salvador, Honduras? Why didn't they stay where they were? Because we as a people had built something here that was so valuable that everyone wanted to come and eat from it. Yet, we as a people, copper-colored people here in America, are the ones who are despised, that are looked upon with bitterness, detestment. We as a people are looked upon in terms of being the drainers of this society. Yet, we the people, as our good friend Martin Luther King said, were the very foundation, the very people who were here, who helped you make this country the country that it is. And yet, we, that same people, can't even feel comfortable walking down the street with our heads up, calling ourselves Americans. Think about it.